in general, it's just a story of, I guess, crypto as being a tool for creating impact and kind of playing along with the meta. Going all the way back, I was born in Curacao in the Caribbean. It's a very small island with just 160,000 people. We used to be a Dutch colony, and we're now kind of part of the Dutch kingdom. I grew up there, afterwards moved to the Netherlands, studied business administration and philosophy, and then along the way got involved into cryptocurrency somewhere around 2016. Didn't quite understand what it was yet, but it was kind of the intersection between the two things that I found really interesting, which is one, philosophy, thinking about the big ideas, about values, on the other hand, business, making something out of it, making it work. And when we initially got involved into cryptocurrencies, we already had a lot of questions. And when I say we, I'm mostly referring to people from the Caribbean living in Europe. It's kind of a culture shock when you arrive here. Everything is so organized and everything seems to work so well. And you ask yourself, why don't we have that? So with this kind of thinking, we founded the Caribbean Blockchain Network, an organization that researches and kind of lays out a roadmap for decentralized applications in the Caribbean. And we soon bumped into the DAO Stack team and started getting interested in DAO technology. A big part of our group also joined the Genesis Alpha DAO, which was kind of one of the first functional DAOs around back then. And this all started with a research on what decentralized governance could mean for Curacao. And then it kind of spiraled out of control or in of control to what we now create, what we're now trying to create, a regenerative economy. So you should kind of see this as my story, being quite a young guy. I'm now 23, and how I experienced kind of development of the crypto industry and how that changed my perception on how Web3 technology can have an impact. Again, if that is kind of translated back into the CuraDAO project and how it developed. So, like I mentioned, it started off quite early with a research in decentralized governance. We presented that end of 2018 on the island. We organized a big innovation event, also already because we didn't want to kind of put crypto into a specific box, but we just wanted to, voice it as being innovation in general. We invited a bunch of different people, ended up with 120 attendees, including the Prime Minister of the island. And from there, things started moving quite fast. In June 2019, we created this concept called CuraDAO, which was more of a grants-giving DAO that was governed and owned by the community. Before we launched the DAO, we did a workshop of 2 days with about 50 attendees to also get them up to speed with kind of what a DAO is, what blockchain is, why it's important. The key initiatives there were mainly the transparency, since on our island we still have a lot of manual systems that are quite hard to understand how they're flowing and where value is. And on the other hand, it's the autonomy for people to be able to have an impact. So the grants giving DAO, CuraDAO, it ran from June to December 2019. This presentation that I have open here was mainly built around that. But during that same period, we also realized that just having a grants giving organization is quite limited in what you can achieve. It's only a handful of people that actually have the skill set and drive to go out and write a proposal and adhere to all the needs of the community and then finally do something. It's then where we already started seeing more and more community currencies pop up, where we studied, for example, what's happening in Kenya with grassroots economics. Will Reddick and his group are doing phenomenal work down there. We looked into Sardinex, we looked into Bristol Pound. There were so many already nice initiatives that went beyond just giving grants and really creating community economies or community currencies. So that's what we moved towards around 2020 with Curadai, which is a stable coin backed to the local currency. I'll go deeper into that later. And then finally, where we are now, where we started to see the potential of DeFi and the potential of on-chain assets to create value flows and to further align incentives. And that's where we really are now, is trying to understand how we can tie the creation and distribution of currencies directly to the positive impact that we want to create in the world. So first, going through the CuraDAO stuff, Yeah, for you to understand kind of where Curacao is, it's just north of Venezuela. Also, one of the reasons why our economy has been struggling for the past couple of years, because Venezuela used to be our biggest economic partner. We used to be a big oil industry with about, like I said, 160,000 inhabitants, former Dutch colony. For a small island, especially in the Caribbean, we are quite wealthy. We have a high GDP and quite good road and infrastructure in terms of internet and whatso. But then also there's a big divide in society where we have, sadly to say, still some colonial things that just spilled on up until today, where you see a big gap between the rich population and the not so rich population. And we have an outdated mindset that is very much built around distrust and, just not a nice environment to be in general. And these big problems spill, right? We have oil refinery as one of the main industries that has been declining a lot. Unemployment was 21% before COVID, and now it has risen to almost 51%. A lot of inequalities and conflicts, and whatso even led to riots a couple months back. So systemic change really is necessary here, and it's not longer a might be nice or must. It really is becoming a must-have. And this is also something that the local institutions, the government, the ministries, the central bank, they realize that the system that they're running on is at least currently not capable of maintaining the well-being of the island. And especially after COVID, we've also seen a lot of more interest from these entities to engage with us or engage with the ideas that we have, because a new start really is needed. So there's already a kind of a foundation that goes beyond just crypto economic, but more about community and hope. And it is that there already are these kind of existing nonprofit organizations and communities that are taking ownership, that are creating food distribution plans, that are creating new alternatives. There's quite a new tech-savvy generation. There's a lot of esports companies starting to pop up on the island, and just new next-generation initiatives. And traditionally, we have also been quite a innovative country. We've been really big in the financial sector as well, mainly due to offshore things, but still, we have quite a well-developed financial sector. And I think the final benefit and hope that we have is, because we're such a small country, the pace at which innovation can evolve is just really quick. If we can get an adoption of, let's say, 1,600 people, that's already 1% of the island. Now, if we get 20,000 people, we basically have the entire island participating in this economy. So fast forward a little bit, we have been running this DAO with currently 43 members, but it has grown since. Different projects that we did were big food forest, big cleanup events on the island with a group of teams. We have been organizing meetups and other events, and also have done digital projects, from digital community pages to creating an innovator collective on the island. But I think the most exciting part of all of this was the realization and the learnings that, one, it works, people are really interested, people want to participate in these crypto economies. I think we also realized that in the end, it really is about the people and the culture way more than it is about the tech. We spent way more time educating people, basic things like self-confidence, how to write a proposal, how to work together, instead of teaching how to vote in a DAO, for example. Communication really is the key there. It's really staying well in touch with your community, giving them places to voice their concerns, places to have conversation, places to come together, both physically and digitally. And then finally, it's standardizing for impact also really generates a bunch of value here, because if we don't know what we're measuring, if we don't know what we're trying to achieve, it's really hard to get there. So a couple of barriers that we ran into, of course, the complexity of DAOs. It's still, and I think this is really getting better with this kind of next generation DAOs that are popping up as we speak. But in general, it's still quite hard for a non-crypto user to participate in a DAO. Then there are the technical limitations. Our DAO is still built on Ethereum mainnet. I think we all are aware of the gas cost and all the bad things that come with that. It is a really important trade-off for us to make, as one, we're trying to make this a regenerative but also a resilient economy on a kind of national level. So it should not be built on a small blockchain with 3 or 5 or 7 or 21 nodes. But on the other hand, we can't expect individuals that earn maybe between $20 to $50 a day to pay that same amount or more in gas fees every time. And then there's still a lot of uncertainty around legal frameworks and crypto regulations on the island and in the region in general. The Caribbean is always reliant on American banks for banking, for international banking. And the American banks aren't quite happy with Caribbean banks doing all that crypto business. So one way we started to work towards an evolution of this was with the creation of Curadai. So Curadai is essentially a localized version of the well-known stablecoin DAI. The way it works is that the currency of Curacao, called the guilder, already has a fixed rate exchange rate between the dollar and the guilder, which is always 179. So through this fixed swap rate, it was quite easy to make a local version of DAI by creating an application that, I'll give an example. So the application works by sending 100 DAI, for example, to the contract. Then the contract locks that up in the contract and mints the same amount of Curadai for the user. Now, there are a couple of reasons why we started working on Curadai and why we just didn't use DAI or another stablecoin. I think the 4 main reasons would be: 1, it's a local unit of account. These communities already have a way of determining value, pricing things, understanding what value is. Changing that to dollars will also kind of change how they interact and how they price things, and we don't want to do that. Then there's a second, more cultural thing to it: seeing your own colors, being able to relate to this currency also is an important part of a currency. It's not just a payment method, it's also a way of expressing values. Third part would be being able to have our own data set that is separate from all the other blockchain transactions happening, for example, with DAI. So having a complete data set specifically for our community. And then the final part is, because it's our community currency, we as a community can make specific incentives and specific pricings for this community. And this is already something that we're seeing in Curacao, where there are now about 10, 15 places accepting Curadai, and some of them are offering cheaper prices for people that pay in Curadai because they want to reward people for being part of this economy. So this was all kind of 2019, 2020, and then the DeFi boom, let's call it, came around, and that changed also our way of looking at finance in general and looking. I think previously finance was oftentimes associated with making money, and it was kind of a sin in our industry. It's either you're making a bunch of money or you're having an impact, and there wasn't really a middle ground. So we started working on this initiative to create something that's beyond just a grants-giving organization, that's beyond just a currency that flows almost like a free market. We wanted to create a system that rewards individuals for the impact that they have on the island. We call this concept colectivo, which means collective in Curacao, in the local language in Papiamento. And with colectivo, we're trying to create an entire flow from community currency creation to resource distribution to impact reporting. So the way you should see it is, we have, for example, a community currency that's 25% backed by hard assets, so either stable coins, dollars, whatever. And then there are different methods of distributing these resources to the right organizations or the right people that have an impact. So that could be through the current model that we have, so a grants-giving DAO. It could be through a conviction voting dashboard that distributes to specific organizations. It could be through investments. There's just different methods that we are experimenting with to see what is most capable of finding impact, funding impact, and generating resources back for this regenerative economy. And then at the final part, it's these projects that do something good, that have an impact, for them to start measuring what impact they have, so we can also communicate that to the outside world, get more resources to the economy, and hopefully take all the learnings of what we're doing here and turn that into a generalizable framework that any community around the world would be able to use. So actually today we made a bunch of progress on this collective concept. where we started the first collectivo food forest. Now, a food forest is a new form of agriculture that combines, that almost takes like a token economic or economic view on farming, and it puts different crops that work well together and that can share nutrition and can provide shadow for each other and what so together in order to more effectively grow crops without needing a lot of water, without needing a lot of labor, which has been the reasons why Curacao hasn't been capable of providing for its own food, because we're quite a dry country and water was always scarce. So what we're doing with this food forest is we're trying to create a way to, one, combat the food scarcity problem that we have on the island, but also find a way to re-incentivize and bring back labor and land that's just being unused right now. I already mentioned almost up to 40 to 50% of the population is unemployed. So there's a bunch of people just sitting around not being able to do anything. And that's just a lack of financial incentives. There's no reason for them to move. And because our currency, the local currency, the guilder, is backed by dollar, we're not able to print our own money. We are dependent on outside funding for our economy to start working again. And that's hopefully where Collectivo can come in. So what we're doing is, with this project, we're creating a food forest that will work as a experiment to professionalize the concept of a food forest. So currently it's mostly hobby farms, but we want to turn this into a scalable model that more people on the island could use. And also you want to experiment with the tokenization of community assets. So how do we raise funds for these kind of initiatives? And also how do we reward and give ownership to the people involved? So what we're doing now, we're raising 10K for the food forest, and the way we're doing that is by distributing up to 40 NFTs that, as you see in the distribution on the right side, each NFT gives the holder up to 1% of the ownership of the food forest. Then that individual can decide if they want to donate those foods to someone locally, if they want to come to the farm and pick it up and keep it for themselves, or if they would want the food first manager to sell the yields and send the resources that we got for it to that address. So it's almost like yield farming, but then in real life. So you're going to buy this NFT, you're going to have a nice art piece that might or might not increase in value. And then also you get 1% of a food forest that will be generating real yields, that will be having a positive impact on the island, and could potentially also lead to further community innovation. So if anyone is interested in watching right now, the tokens are already available on OpenSea or Rarible. And this is just the start. So what you can envision is that these food forests, especially if they're able to generate real yields, they could also be used to provide these capital assets, these food forest tokens, as collateral in the reserve to mint more community currencies. And if we can get to the point where we have that positive feedback loop from a food forest being created, that generating returns that are automatically deposited into the reserve, that then create more community currencies that can fund more food forests, I think that's the point where we get to like this revolution or renaissance of community currencies, and we're really building an economy that gets better, becomes more resilient and more impactful as it grows. That's a quick summary, I guess, of how the different crypto innovations, from just first hearing about DAOs to understanding community currencies, and now seeing all these DeFi and NFT innovations, how with these concepts we're able to better tailor and create impact on small Caribbean islands, but hopefully anywhere around the world.
Great, thank you so much. It's awesome to see the Food Collective and you using the power of NFTs to help build that the funding and kind of bridge people's ability to contribute.
Yeah, for sure. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. You can also reach me at LuukDAO on Twitter, Telegram, whatever. Always curious to see what other people are building, and I think in general, I don't know if you guys know about the project called Ethic Hub. They have been doing something towards the same direction for more than 2 years already. They're doing it mainly in Mexico, and they're providing resource for farmers and getting stable returns for the investors. And I think this is really where DeFi can move beyond just speculative investments and starting to bridge towards the real world. It's not going to be, I guess, the traditional financial use cases, because those people don't need these loans. It's kind of these edge cases of people that don't have enough resources and that are willing to pay a good premium because they understand that resources are more scarce in their environment.
Very cool. I especially like the NFT idea here, and it kind of sparked some ideas. We had Manu up first talking about some of the current events in Argentina, and this might be another awesome way to raise some funds for emergency relief of things, creating NFTs that can then, show your support for any sort of movement or project that's going on, like your Colectivo Food Project, and a badge of support and royalties of donations to move along.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really, it's because previously a lot of people have been donating to the island, but I mean, it's obvious that cryptocurrency already has an added value there by being more transparent and being more borderless and instant and whatso. But then also adding on top of that this idea of assets. I think that once that clicked in my mind, that assets generate yield, generate returns, which you can reinvest and that can compound, like it really changed about how I look at crypto concepts and how I look at utilizing that in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a whole new world that we're dealing with here. Yep.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so
I
much
think
for your...
my final words would be that for anyone who's watching, but also anyone who is building something, to just continue and build the craziest ideas that you can think of, because it is these innovations that at first may look super silly. Like, why are we selling a digital tree token or anything? But I think those are the innovations that 10 years from now will make the difference from the more, I'd say, traditional paradigm innovations. Let's forget about those. It's time for a new paradigm. And we're the builders doing that.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice, especially to people stepping in and like, why am I doing this? What am I doing?
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.